We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start on Chapter 1 regulations, but before we do that, we're going to cover some objectives and some key terms. So what we're going to cover in this class is we're going to understand, what's covered on the 107, what you have to have. We're going to cover the regulations behind a UAS, flight operations, airspace requirements, weather, loading and performance, and of course operations. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Some key terms that you need to know just to help make things a little bit easier and understand, some of the terminology. Control station, which is CS. It's an interface used by remote pilots to control the flight path of a UAS. It's a remote, for the simple term. So an unmanned aircraft is a UA, UAS, UAV. You'll see those terms a lot. Visual line of sight, VOS. Visual line of sight is always have your eye on the drone. You can always see it at all times. You never want to lose eye contact with your drone. Even though you have a camera and you have it on your tablet, a smartphone, you still always want to keep a visual line of sight on the drone. A VO, a visual observer, that is your partner. While you're flying the drone, you're conducting your operations, you have someone watching out for power lines, for people, trees, any obstructions that could get in the way to cause damage to the drone, personal or property. And PIC, pilot in command. Pilot in command is the commander. He is directly responsible for all actions for the flight, for the drone, to make sure everything is done the right way. So Chapter 1, regulations. To have a remote pilot certification, you must apply with the FAA. You have to be at least 16 years old, be able to read, write, speak English, be in physical and mental health, and then the full training of Part 107. So a remote PIC, your privileges is everything is up to you. You have to ensure that the operation poses no hazard to the people, the aircraft, or property. You operate the UAS to ensure compliance with all provisions and regulations. You have to make sure that you're flying in an area that you're supposed to be. There's no airports, no NOTAMs, no TFRs. Supporting crew roles. Supporting crews would be your visual observer. It's a person who does not hold a 107 and you haven't passed the training or the requirements to do so. Accident reporting. The FAA requires you to report an accident and within 10 days only if there's serious injury to a person or damage to property that occurs that's greater than $500. And you have, like I said, 10 days to do so. You have to register your drone if it is over 0.55 pounds. You register that with the FAA. That is separate than the 107. Even if you're flying recreational, you still have to register your drone with the FAA. You can do that on your website. Pre-flight inspection. A pre-flight inspection is extremely important. Before you fly a drone, you always want to make sure that the drone is in flying condition. The propellers, you want to check those. You want to make sure your batteries are topped off on the drone itself, your phone, your tablet, and the remote itself. You want to check local weather conditions. There's a million apps out there for that. The one I use personally is UAV Forecast. It's for iPhones and Androids. It's a really great app. It's free. It'll tell you the weather. You can set different parameters. If you are not comfortable in flying in higher winds, you can set that and it'll tell you whether it's good to fly or not so good to fly. Also, there's a map on it that shows you where heliports are, airports. If there's a temporary flight restriction, it shows up. All of those things are covered on this one app. It's really great. The only time you can fly at night is with a waiver, but you can fly at civil twilight, which is 30 minutes before or after sunset. When you're flying during civil twilight, the UAS must be equipped with anti-collision lights visible up to 3 statute miles. Most of your DJI drones have these. Most of your drones now have these lights on them. Visual line of sight, like we talked to before, the UAS must maintain visual line of sight with the flight crew. The remote pilot in command, or person manipulating the controls, or the visual observer may use vision aids only briefly to avoid flying over persons and avoiding conflicting aircraft. When you're flying a UAS, you are limited to altitude. The drone cannot be flown faster than 87 knots, which is 100 miles per hour. It cannot be flown higher than 400 feet AGL, which is above ground level. Unless you're like, let's say we're flying a tower, expecting a cell phone tower. If that was the case, you're able to fly 400 feet above that tower. So in our graph here, if that tower was 1,200 feet above ground level, you would be able to fly at a maximum altitude of 1,600 AGL. A radius around that tower, any obstruction, you're about 400 feet is where you need to stay. Just like anything else, you need to maintain visibility. Cloud distance, you must maintain a minimum distance from clouds, no less than 500 feet below and 2,000 feet horizontally. So now we're going to cover right-of-way rules, operating from a moving vehicle, alcohol and drugs. So with right-of-way rules, no person must operate a small unmanned aircraft in the manner that interferes with operations and traffic patterns of any airport, which you're not allowed to fly around the airport, so shouldn't have a problem staying away from airports. The PIC is also responsible to maintain a clear and yield right-of-way of aircraft. Let's say that you're flying and you notice, or your visual observer notices, a helicopter moving in. You always want to land your drone safely and stay out of its way. Never come close to a manned aircraft. Always let them have the right of way. No operations over people. You may not operate a small unmanned aircraft directly above another person unless that person is involved with the flight operations. Operating from a moving vehicle. You're not allowed to operate from a moving vehicle while flying a drone. Alcohol and drugs, it would be the same thing as trying to operate a vehicle while under the influence.